From dusty boxes forgotten in the attic, emerge military artifacts handed down across 5 generations.
The writing is unbelievable. I can't believe it's in such good shape.
An heirloom that may be a long-lost piece of history.
I think this is a once-in-a-lifetime find. I had never seen one before. I don't expect to see one again.
Value is just rising with literally every fold.
A war, a map, a mystery.
I had a little momentary roller coaster there.
Will it lead to one family's hidden treasure?
I'm Jamie Colby, and today I'm in Birmingham, Alabama, which is in the rolling foothills of the Appalachians. They say that wars are fought to change maps, and this episode of Strange Inheritance is actually about a map, a very old map, and one that survives in a family whose history spans from Texas to Virginia and then back here to Alabama.
My name is Patrick Martin. My parents died in 1999, and my sister and I inherited the house and contents. We were surprised when we figured out what it contained.
The house that Patrick and his sister Peggy inherited here in Birmingham is now their home. Patrick, thank you so much for having me over.
It's our pleasure.
Patrick's parents moved to Alabama from Maryland and bought the house in the 1960s. Patrick, an architect, returns to take care of his ill parents in 1994, but then has his own health scare.
I had a quintuple bypass surgery here.
Patrick's heart trouble leads him to an early retirement at age 47. With lots of time on his hands, he starts rummaging through the house, including the attic. It's here that he comes across a box he remembers from his childhood. This looks very, very old, just right from the start. The box contains family letters and legal documents, some going back to the 18th century.
This packet is letters from the 1780s.
Patrick also discovers an old U.S. Army muster book, an official ledger listing soldiers and keeping track of their pay. The writing is unbelievable. I can't believe it's in such good shape.
This book is put into 2 sections, the War of 1812 and then the Mexican War.
Patrick's family has a long history of military service. In 1846, his great-great-grandfather Nicholas Martin leads a Virginia battalion in the Mexican-American War, one of the most controversial in U.S. history.
Although the war is very little known among Americans, it's actually the most important war fought between 2 neighbors in the Western Hemisphere. In 1845, Texas is annexed by the United States, but the Texas boundary claim now becomes an American problem.
And it turns out an opportunity for President James K. Polk, a slave-holding Tennessee Democrat who believes God has ordained the United States to expand across the continent. Many opponents of war with Mexico condemn this idea of manifest destiny as simply the conquest of territory for new slave states, including a fresh-faced freshman congressman from Illinois.
Abraham Lincoln is an opponent of this war. He gives a series of speeches blasting the Polk administration.
The war, the first in history documented with photographs, breaks out in April 1846. Mexico surrenders in 1848, losing half its national domain.
The United States acquires not just the American Southwest, but also California.
Left unresolved, where slavery will be allowed in those territories.
The debate over whether those territories are going to be slave or free is going to be so contentious and so divisive that it's ultimately going to lead to the Civil War in 1861.
Patrick's box contains a number of Civil War items, too. Cool stuff, like some certificates from the Confederate Postal Service. He can't be sure how all those items came to his family. Some most likely are from that great-great-grandfather who fought in Mexico.
The other possibility is his son, Hudson, who was a lawyer, and he represented soldiers.
The artifacts are passed down through the generations, ultimately making their way to the family estate in Virginia. When Patrick's grandfather dies in 1956 and the family is clearing out the house, his father winds up with the historical items by chance.
On a whim, he just said, well, take those 6 boxes.
The boxes end up in the basement of Patrick's childhood home outside Washington, D.C. They become a way to kill boredom for a curious 12-year-old boy.
Patrick, did you really play with all this stuff as a kid?
I did. I loved the boxes. You'd find letters from the Civil War talking about troop movements or political discussions just before Lincoln's election. And you felt a connection to family and a fun connection to history.
Your imagination could run wild.
Absolutely.
One of his favorite items, an old map of Texas.
It was a fun toy. I just enjoyed the fact that Texas was so different. It had Indian villages, it had forts, it had all kinds of interesting things for a 10 or a 12-year-old.
Somehow, the map avoids being used to make a fort or a Halloween mask.
I showed it to my parents, and they knew I was playing with it, and that was fine because it was just the old Texas map.
As Patrick grows up, the map and the other items in the boxes become distant childhood memories. In 1967, his parents moved to Birmingham, where the boxes are stored and forgotten once again. That is until Patrick moves here to take care of his folks and rediscovers them. His parents pass away in 1999 within 10 days of each other. The family home and those time-worn boxes are now Patrick and his sister Peggy's inheritance. Proud of his family heritage, he shows off the heirlooms during dinner parties.
I'm crazy about history, and this was a resource that I wanted to share with people.
He even brings them out to the Thanksgiving table.
So this Thanksgiving dinner, literally, between the gravy bowl and the turkey, you bring the map out and put it on the table, this table?
That's true. It was the end of dinner, so it was mostly messy plates, and that probably made it worse, as far as danger to the map. At the time, its value was the joy it would give you looking at the thing.
But by 2013, Patrick wonders if he might reap another kind of joy from his strange inheritance. To be blunt, he could use the money. Since retiring early at age 47, Patrick has accumulated substantial credit card debt, not to mention a home equity loan that he and his sister Peggy took out.
The credit card debt is monumental. We have a small home equity loan that this potentially could pay off.
Patrick notices that an auction house is holding an appraisal fair in Birmingham.
I thought, I'll throw a box of stuff together and see if anything's worth anything.
At the fair, Patrick cautiously breaks out the old family war stuff.
Did you feel like one would be worth more than the others?
I actually thought the muster book was going to be of more significant monetary value. As it turned out, he says he thinks the muster book probably would be a couple of $1,000s. And I thought, well, that's nice, but it's not life-changing.
Patrick shows a few more heirlooms and gets the same tepid response. Down to his final item, he unfolds his childhood plaything, that old Texas map.
What happened when you pulled the map out?
You could tell his demeanor changed. His face lit up. He was very excited.
What's your heart doing at that point?
It's beating very well.
What had been sitting in the attic all this time?
I had never seen one before, and I don't expect to see one again.
That's next.
But first, our strange inheritance quiz question. Which war saw the most combat veterans go on to become U.S. president? Is it the Revolutionary War, the Mexican-American War, the Civil War, or World War II? The answer when we return. So, which war saw the most combat veterans go on to become U.S. president? It's C, the Civil War. 5 future presidents, Grant, Hayes, Garfield, Harrison, and McKinley, saw combat during the Civil War.
In Birmingham, Alabama in May 2013, Patrick Martin visits a traveling appraisal fair, hoping some of his family's old military artifacts can pay off his growing debts. It's not going well. That is until he pulls out an old map of Texas for Heritage Auctions appraiser Joe Fay.
I had seen this map before, but I had only seen reprints of it.
Joe instantly recognizes the print as apparently the work of Jacob D. Cordova, who commissioned the first maps in 1849, right after the U.S. won the Mexican-American War. D. Cordova used the map as a promotional tool to lure adventurous immigrants to the state.
He was a land agent who helped settle people in Texas, and he wanted a document that showed them the vastness of the land that was available for them to settle.
D. Cordova obtained official signature endorsements from famous Texans, including Sam Houston, to further his cause.
Sam Houston, on the floor of the U.S. Senate, referred to this as the most accurate depiction of Texas that anyone had ever compiled.
With Patrick's copy, Joe is excited but skeptical. He knows such a famous map has countless reprints and forgeries.
I noticed that the paper was right, consistent with the period, but still it could be a reprint.
Fortunately for Joe, D. Cordova himself left a vital clue.
There's a printed notice that basically says, without my signature, this map is fraudulently obtained.
Patrick's map includes a signature that appears to match D. Cordova's, but is it hand-signed or printed? Another clue.
I could see the ink bleeding through to the back of the map, which only happens if it's authentically signed with ink. Once I saw this, really nothing else mattered that weekend.
The map is no doubt the find of the appraisal fair.
He said, we had this auction last year, and the second edition sold for $44,000.
A first edition from 1849 would be worth even more. Only a few are known to still exist. Joe suspects that Patrick's map could be a first edition. Geography will tell the tale.
There are several features of this map that wouldn't be recognizable to somebody looking at the state of Texas today.
You see, the Republic of Texas once stretched as far north as Wyoming and as far west as Santa Fe. Over the years, those boundaries are chipped away. The biggest land transfer comes in 1850, when Texas gives up vast tracts of western land to the federal government in exchange for debt relief. Come to think of it, that's the same outcome Patrick's aiming for. The end result, the Texas shape we know today. So what version of Texas did Patrick's map show?
Just north of the state line of Texas is an area that's referred to on the map as Indian Territory, which we know today is Oklahoma. There's a strip on the left side of the map that's Santa Fe Territory. So at that point, that was that eureka moment of, this is actually an 1849 D. Cordova map.
Joe ups his initial appraisal.
He said, yours is a first edition, therefore we think it would be $60,000 to $80,000. So I called my sister and decided to sell the map.
Joe tells Patrick the value could go up or down depending on the map's condition and previous sales. He wants to hold on to the heirloom for more research. Joe gets on a plane to Dallas to show the map to Sandra Palomino, who specializes in Texana artifacts. All she needs is one look.
What kind of condition was the map in when you got it?
That's next on Strange Inheritance.
Here's another quiz question. What role did future Army General and U.S. President Ulysses S. Grant play in the Mexican-American War? Was it quartermaster, sniper, or medic? The answer when we return. So what role did future Army General and U.S. President Ulysses S. Grant play in the Mexican-American War? The answer is A, quartermaster. Grant was in charge of distributing supplies and provisions to the 4th Infantry Regiment.
In Birmingham, Alabama, Patrick Martin is eagerly awaiting the latest appraisal of his strange inheritance, an 1849 first edition map of the new state of Texas. Joe Fay has pegged its value at $80,000. If he's right, that would go a long way to wiping out the debt Patrick has run up since retiring after quintuple bypass surgery.
Although the map meant a lot to me, when you put a dollar value on it, that can change your financial base. You're thinking, I can get rid of this debt, but you don't want to buy into it yet.
After all, Patrick knows his map hasn't exactly been treated like a museum exhibit, and its condition can have a major impact on its sale price. That's why Joe Fay brings the map to Dallas to get a second opinion from Sandra Palomino. It's why Dallas is my next stop as well.
What kind of condition was the map in when you got it?
It was in wonderful condition. It was just amazing to us that there were no separations along any of the folds. Condition is everything. And value is just rising with literally every fold that we're opening.
Did you know as an expert in maps and documents and other historical artifacts that it existed?
This particular map is newly discovered because it was on nobody's radar.
How big is the market for maps?
For collectors in general, they love that period from 1834, 1835, up through the late 1850s.
That's because so many families trace their Texan roots back to the immigration boom of that period.
Texans are very, very prideful of their roots, and they see it almost as a responsibility to preserve the history and pass it on.
And many of those early Texans were influenced by D. Cordova and his map.
It's a treasured piece of history, and that's what this map is to Texana collectors.
A few days after the original appraisal, Patrick receives a call from Heritage Auctions.
Joe Fay calls, and Joe says, I missed the estimate on the map. So I think he's overpriced it.
Instead, Fay says it could be more than $80,000, a lot more. 6 figures, easy.
So, right away, I'm ecstatic.
On March 15, 2014, Patrick Martin's first edition map of Texas goes up on the auction block in Dallas. Patrick monitors the auction by computer from his home in Birmingham. Things are not off to a smooth start.
The auction actually was going slow generally. Things weren't reaching their auction estimate, so as my map came up, I was trepidatious.
The map opens at $75,000, and it appears only 2 bidders will be competing for it. The amount slowly creeps higher, from $75,000 to $85,000, then to $97,000. Patrick knows he should be ecstatic, but you know how it goes. When you're told 6 figures, it's 6 figures you want.
This time, it stopped long enough that the auctioneer said fair warning, and so I thought, it's going to go at 97.
Is he right? That's next on Strange Inheritance.
Now, back to Strange Inheritance.
After being passed down through 5 generations of Patrick Martin's family, a rare first edition map from the early days of Texas statehood goes on the auction block in Dallas in March 2014. The bidders push the price up from $75,000 to $85,000. It's a lot of money, but Patrick has been led to believe this strange inheritance would fetch a lot more than that. The bidding jumps to $97,000, then stalls again.
I had a little momentary roller coaster there of letdown, euphoric letdown.
Then, after what seems to be ages, the bidding picks up again. Soon, it passes the $100,000 mark and keeps on climbing. The final sale price, including a premium the buyer pays to the auctioneer, a whopping $149,000. After paying seller fees, Patrick and his sister take home $96,000, $48,000 each. They can finally get rid of all their debt, every penny of it.
Immediately, within a day, we had paid off the home equity loan and the credit card loans. So it was great.
It's admirable that you paid off debt with the money you got from the map, much more money than you expected. But come on, Patrick, you must have bought a little splurge here or there for you or your sister Peggy.
Well, actually, we both still have a chunk that's waiting to splurge. We're trying to figure out what the splurge will be.
A map somehow ends up in the hands of a distant ancestor, makes its way from basement to attic to moving van and back. escapes the ravages of a kid's imagination, and dinner party show and tell, the Martin family treasure survived an improbable course no cartographer could map out.
Any regret?
None. I have no problem with selling the map, even though I did enjoy it, and I love sharing it, but in a way, you're sharing it again.
And what about all those other precious family heirlooms?
Could there be more treasure from the attic?
Well, hopefully. I can only dream that it would be as good as the map.
The man who commissioned the Texas map that Patrick inherited, Jacob de Cordova, was one of the most enthusiastic and colorful promoters of Texas. And he put his money where his mouth was. He himself bought up 1 million acres of land to sell to settlers. During the Civil War, in fact, many Texans lost everything and were unable to pay off their liens. Although de Cordova stood to lose a fortune, he refused to foreclose, saying, after all, he was the one who encouraged them to move to Texas in the first place. I'm Jamie Colby for Strange Inheritance, and remember, you can't take it with you.
Do you have a strange inheritance story you'd like to share with us? We'd love to hear it. Send me an email or go to our website, strangeinheritance.com.